know it led to like really grueling travel, especially this week, but we appreciate you guys all showing up, and we appreciate you guys bringing Tigers baseball to our fans all year long. Before I get into questions, I just want to talk generally about a few thoughts that are rattling in my head and that have been for the last few days. I think first and foremost, like I wish we weren't here right now. I wish we were in Toronto preparing for Game 2 of the ALCS. We were really close to being in Toronto right now, but we're not. We didn't achieve our ultimate goal of winning the World Series, and now we're here at a press conference. And I think anytime you get to the playoffs and you fail to win a World Series, it leaves a really bitter taste in your mouth. I very much feel that. I've felt it all weekend. I know AJ feels it. I know a bunch of our players and coaches feel that. And I expect us to feel that for a while. I also expect that bitter taste in our mouths to drive us this offseason, to drive our players individually to make gains, and to drive us as a group to make sure that we can build off of some of the good things that happened this year. I think the other thing that really sticks in my head is this season was full of emotional swings, really big emotional swings. There were times when this team looked like it was rolling, when we were executing at a really high level in all phases of the game, when we were putting a ton of pressure on opposing starters in the first inning, driving up pitch counts, holding the zone, coming through in big spots, and playing a brand of baseball that could beat opposing teams in a number of ways. There were also times this year where we were fighting through adversity. We were not holding the zone. We were not executing in big spots. We were not playing clean and consistent baseball in all phases of the game, and we were struggling to recapture the momentum that really drove this team for the first 5 months. Those emotional swings combined with the passion with which our fans follow and support this team created some really high highs and some really low lows. I felt those highs and I felt those lows, and I was right there with our fans in all of those moments. In some ways, it felt like this season was multiple seasons in one, multiple very different seasons in one. And we gotta take a hard look at all of it. We got to take all the good and we got to take all the bad, and we got to learn from all of it. However, I think in my job, it is really important for me to step back and look at the entire season. It's really important for me to look at it from a 30,000-foot view. And I think when you do that, it is hard to characterize this season as anything other than another big step forward for an organization that's come a really long way in a short period of time. Among things that we did this year, we won more games than we did last year. We had 6 All-Stars, the most in all of baseball. We got to the postseason 2 consecutive years for the 5th time in over 100 years in this organization. We won another postseason series, and we earned our 8th postseason win in 2 years. I think that's the 3rd most in all of baseball. We had many players on our big league team that took a big step forward. We entered the season with the number 1 overall farm system, and many of our most important prospects had dominant seasons on their way to some of them reaching the postseason or reaching the big leagues in 2026. And I think the most important thing when I reflect on the entire season is we went a calendar year from late August to late August with the most major league wins of any organization in baseball. And we finished the 2025 season with the best overall organizational record of any organization in the sport. Those are really big deals. Those are really hard to do. Our players and our coaches in that clubhouse deserve a ton of credit for all that stuff. I'm really proud of them for all that stuff. That's really hard to do, and it's especially impressive for a young group that's still entering their prime right now. So we got a lot to be proud of from this season. Now, I understand here, like, the arc of our season is not doing us any favors here. Anytime you have 5 dominant months and then you perform as poorly as we did in September, it raises questions. I'm sure you guys are going to ask me a lot of those questions. I deserve to get those questions, and we deserve the negative narratives that are swirling around this team. However, I think it is important to have some perspective here. Like, if we had sequenced our season differently but got to the same place, like by way of example, if we had stumbled out of the gate and had a really tough April, and then posted 5 dominant months from May through September, I think the mood around this team is very different. I think the narratives around this team are very different. Even if we had gotten to the same place, how we got to this place, I think is important. And I think that's driving a lot of the conversation around this team right now. And we deserve that. Because anytime you sequence this season the way we did, we deserve to have these questions. And me personally, I can't be naive to what I saw in September. I can't be naive to some of the struggles that we faced in the biggest moments. I can't be naive to the fact that we got to get a whole lot better at a lot of things in this organization. We did all these things that I listed, all these achievements, which are really impressive and I'm really proud of, but we got to get a whole lot better in a lot of different areas. And some of those areas I wanted to share at the outset here, like the first thing is our approach at the plate. In the big leagues, it seemed like our approach started to deteriorate down the stretch. We posted a really high-powered offense that performed in many of the most important categories for 5 months, and then we really stumbled down the stretch. We got to figure out why. We got to understand why our approach seemed to deteriorate down the stretch, and we got to understand the adjustments that we need to make to put together an entire season of, a high-performing offense instead of just 5 months and then struggling down the stretch. I think the second area that we need to look into is contact. We need to make more contact as an organization. We need to move the baseball more in the big leagues than we are. This has been a theme from the last 2 years. I think there are a lot of players on our team right now that have some swing and miss in their games. But I think there are some things that we can do to improve upon it. I'm sure we'll talk about it today. But the time for that is now. We need to start making those gains right now. We need to make sure that we have a team next year that can consistently across 6 months make enough contact to be a productive offense. I think if you go back and you look at our season, the months in which we made more contact, we were one of the best offenses in baseball. If you take a look at June, which was the lowest strikeout rate month that we had this season, we also had the best offense in baseball. When this group does move the ball, we can do a lot of damage. We can score a lot of runs. We got to find a way to be able to do that more consistently, and there's some ways that we have already talked about that we're working on immediately. I think the third thing that we need to get a lot better at is we need to improve our health and consistency on the mound. I think if you go back and look at this season, we had a ton of injuries. Out of the gate, we had a ton of injuries, and we had a steady stream of injuries throughout the entire season. It affected us on both sides of the ball, but I think it affected us more on the pitching side. I think some of the injuries that we had in the big leagues and the minor leagues started to thin out our depth, and we weren't able to produce that second wave of pitching this year in August and September that we needed to supplement this team. We did it last year. We added some really important arms that helped us, go 31-11 down the stretch. We weren't able to do that, and I think the injuries and the setbacks that we faced in both the big leagues and the minor leagues were a significant contributing factor to the struggles that we faced down the stretch. So we got to find a way as an organization to make some adjustments to keep our players healthier and performing better deeper into the season, because the expectations have changed around here. We're trying to play a 7-month season instead of a 6-month season, and we need to make those changes to help make sure that we have reinforcements in August and September that can help us. And I think the last one is something I've talked about a lot, but we got to continue to get better. We have to continue to get better at breaking young players into the big leagues. I've talked about it since the day I got here, and I've been very outspoken about trying to make sure that the environment that Colt Keith and Parker Meadows jump into is better than the environment that Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson jumped into. And then the environment that Dylan Dingler jumped into is better than the environment that Colt Keith and Parker Meadows jumped into. We got to keep making progress there, because it's too important to our future. We've talked a lot about our last 3 drafts. We've talked a lot about some of the players coming through the minor leagues. Those guys are really close. A lot of them are going to help us next year, and we got to make sure that the environment that they're jumping into is going to get the absolute most out of them. And that work starts right now. We got to prepare the environment for these guys to be able to jump on this team as soon as next year and make this team better, not struggle in the first 2, 3, 4 months to adjust to big league pitching and to help this team get better. It's too important to our future, and it's something that we need to take very seriously as soon as today. So some areas, happy to take any of your questions. AJ's here to take the questions from the manager's seat, but what do you guys got?
Scott, you mentioned the lack of the zone and hitting and also the pitching depth. Do you look back at the deadline and say, I could have done more to make sure this wouldn't happen nobody was ever suggesting trading Clark or McGonigal, without trading the top prospects to get help in those areas that you mentioned that declined?
Yeah. Do I regret not adding more performance to this team at the deadline? I don't think I've ever gone through a deadline completely satisfied with the results. It's a really difficult challenge, and I think this deadline is another deadline when I wasn't completely satisfied with the results. However, do I regret not pulling the trigger on the deals that we had access to at the deadline? I don't, and I'll tell you why. I think I'm even more confident now than I was then that the deals that we had access to that we passed on would have frustrated our fans more than not doing the deals. It's really tough in my job right now because I can't share the exact deals for obvious reasons, but I can share some details that hopefully are pretty illuminating. I would tell you that the players that were most closely connected to us via the media would have cost either a player on our postseason roster plus additional pieces or one of our top prospects plus additional pieces. In some cases, with those deals that were most closely connected to us, those players that were most closely connected to us, those players, some of them didn't perform at all down the stretch, would have been a free agent in 2 months, and would have cost a player on our postseason roster that actually performed better than the player we acquired and was controllable in the future. So think about that for a second. We could have acquired a player who was going to be a pending free agent on the day of the deadline. We probably would have gotten an A on the trade grades on the day of the deadline and probably would have gotten plenty of praise in the coverage, only to see that player not perform well down the stretch and the player we traded perform better than that player this year and be controllable in the future. I don't regret those deals at all. I actually am proud of our group for evaluating the players we had well and thinking, hey, these players are going to help us this year and in the future and get some really big outs for us in the postseason. So those are my feelings on like whether there's any sense of regret on the deals. I think, the subtext of the point I'm trying to make here is, in my job, I got to operate in actual markets. I can't get caught up in hopes and wishes or theoretical markets. If there are players that, anyone in this room thinks that we had access to for a reasonable return and we should have pulled the trigger on, like, you should criticize me. I deserve that criticism and I should learn from that criticism. But criticizing us for not acquiring a top of the rotation starter or a controllable middle of the order bat when none were moved at the deadline, I don't think is fair or constructive.
Scott, just to build on that question with the trade deadline, were there pieces that maybe weren't floated by the media that you feel like you guys could have went out and acquired, or were you unable to, make those kind of deals?
We chased a lot of players that weren't connected to us in the media. We got close on some players. We didn't get close on other deals. I think what's important is if you look at how it all played out, like, we went into the market thinking like, hey, we think the relief market's pretty deep here at the deadline, and we think the starter market is really shallow. Like, we think it's really thin. And I think that largely played out. I think those evaluations aged pretty well. I also think we dipped into the relief market at the deadline, and we acquired the second best performing back-end reliever acquired by any contender in Finnegan. We also added another useful arm in Rafael Montero, and we added Troy Melton to the back end of our rotation. I think those three additions stabilized the back of our bullpen and got some really big outs for us. I think in the starter market, going into the deadline, we didn't think that the starters that we had access to would have started playoff games for us. We didn't think they were better than our front four of, at the time, was Reese, Tarek, Jack, and Casey in no particular order. So going into it, both as a reflection of our evaluation of the starters available and the starting pitching that we had, we didn't think that the players that we could have acquired in the rotation would have made a big impact for us in the postseason. So we didn't think it was in the best interest of the organization to pay steep prospect costs or take a player off our postseason roster to get a starter that we didn't think was going to factor in much into the postseason. Now, when Reese went down, it did change our starting pitching need, but it didn't change the market. And I think if you follow the starters that moved, I think there was only one starter that posted a sub-4 ERA after the deadline that got moved at the deadline. So I do actually think our evaluations of those starters were right. Do I wish that we had added more productive innings to our rotation in the deals we did? Absolutely. I definitely do. I thought Paddock and Morton performed, gave us a boost right away. Paddock had a really good start against the D-backs. Morton pitched really well in a tough environment in Philly, but they were struggled to be able to reproduce that performance down the stretch, and we needed more performance in our rotation, and we weren't able to do that, and that's on me. I should have done better in the rotation, but I do think it is a reflection on the actual markets that existed, and I'm proud of the efforts that our staff did.
Tarek is obviously going into the final year of his controllability. How much of a decision point is that this off season, or are you just? I mean, are you kind of prepared to go into the season with him and see how it rolls that way?
Yeah, listen. I totally understand the question, and I understand that you have to ask me. I've kind of learned over time, especially with this question, that general comments tend to get chopped up and forced into narratives. I can't comment on our players being traded. I can't comment on free agents, and I can't comment on other teams' players. So I'm going to respond by just not actually commenting on it. Tarek is a Tiger. I hope he wins the Cy Young for the second consecutive year. He's an incredible pitcher, and we're lucky to have him. That's all I can say on that.
Can I just ask one more that you
Sure.
probably won't answer? But there was reports toward the end of the season that AJ had either been offered an extension or was close to signing an extension. Is there any news on that you can share?
Yeah, I can share that report was baseless because we extended AJ earlier in the year. I absolutely love working with AJ. I think he's one of the best managers in the game. We have now proactively extended him twice because we want him to be here as long as he's willing to be here, and I want to work with him as long as I can possibly work with him. It was one of the easier conversations I've had because, as he'll share, he wants to be here too, and I think we're both bullish on our future in this organization, and we're both proud of what we've done in the 3 years together. You want to comment on that?
I'm going to comment on it? Yeah. No, I've been in this chair for a long time, not just the managing chair in Detroit, but across the league. And I've gotten asked a ton about contracts and commitment and things like that. And I'm so happy being in Detroit, and I'm so proud to be the manager here. I love working for Scott, and it is the second time that I was approached and asked for more. And it's an immediate yes for me. I mean, when you have an environment, and any of you guys can relate, when you have an environment that both pushes you and satisfies you, you want to be in it. And so, I was honored. I was thrilled. It was one conversation with my wife, and went back to Scott with an immediate yes, and off we went. And it was, in the middle of the season, it's hard to look at personally at where you're at, which is why my one request and Scott's one request was that we just do it and be done with it and not talk about it. This was about the players during the season. It was about winning. We wanted to chase down the division. We had a lot of games left, and so we didn't want to be a distraction. But I can't tell you how proud I am enough to be the manager of the Tigers. I mean, it's a rewarding place to be. It's somewhere I bought a home here. We live here the majority of the year, and continue to be thrilled to become more and more Michiganders as a family. And so, very grateful. From Chris to Jeff to Scott, all of us are on board to bring a World Series here, and that's why I want to be here.
Can you tell us how many years he's under contract?
So we have an organizational policy to not share terms for non-player contracts. We'll share all the terms for player contracts, but we're not going to share the terms for ours.
One other due diligence question. Will ownership give you what it takes to sign Tarek Skubal long term?
Chris has been supportive with everything we want to do. It was one of the key questions that I had when I interviewed for this job and considered leaving the Giants to come to this job. I know that Chris is going to support us with everything we need, both in terms of player payroll, but also non-player payroll, all of the infrastructure investments, all the investments in key staff members that can help us bring a World Series here. So I have no concerns about that.
Yep. Scott, you mentioned expectations have changed around here. 2 straight years, you've made it really close to the ALCS. So do you view yourself as a World Series contender now going into next season? If that's true, would your approach change anymore as far as being more aggressive in the offseason, getting key free agents, higher price free agents, and being a little bit more aggressive at the trade deadline?
Yeah, I hope that I've demonstrated since I've been here that we're focused on winning baseball games and trying to win a World Series, not winters or deadlines. Sometimes that means that we're going to go into a winter and we're going to chase the flashiest name and we're going to offer a lot of money. And sometimes that means we're going to go into a winter and focus on more targeted needs. I don't know exactly what this winter is going to be. We have several weeks to devise our strategy and start executing on it. But since the day I've been here, I've been trying to win a World Series. And I think it's important to not lose perspective here. I was sitting in this building 3 years ago. I was on a stage and we were talking about a struggling major league team. We were talking about the 30th ranked farm system, and we were talking about an organization that hadn't been to the playoffs in a long time. Now, 3 years later, we're talking about back-to-back postseason appearances. We're talking about the number 1 farm system in baseball, and we're talking about a young core there that's just entering their prime, continuing to get better. I think the trend line in this organization is really important, and how we've done it is really important. We have been focused on a path of development, of getting more out of our players and supplementing our players with external additions that can help us get even better. That part's not going to change. We're going to stay on the development track. And what excites me is we've done all of that without a single draft pick of the last 3 years getting to the big leagues. We're entering a new era where some of these players that you guys have heard about and you've seen on clips on Twitter, they're going to get to the big leagues and you're going to see them perform. And I think there's a few things that are going to happen as that happens. One, we're not replacing the guys in there. We're adding to them, which is great. These guys have gotten to the postseason 2 consecutive years, and we're going to add to that because these guys are still young and entering their prime. The second thing is I think some of our approach and contact issues are going to improve just through development of the guys in that room, but also additions from our system. I think for those of you who've been following our system, I think the profile of Tigers hitters has changed over the last 3 years. We've been very intentional about targeting at bat quality and bat-to-ball skills. I think as these players start to get to the big leagues, it's going to nudge our big league team towards more contact and better approaches. And it's also going to improve our defense because most of our players in the minor leagues are actually two-way players that can be assets on both sides of the ball. They can be impact defenders, and they can also swing at the right pitches and make a ton of contact at the plate. A lot of those gains are going to come from within. It's why we've been so intentional about drafting, developing, and ultimately getting these guys to the big leagues. And what excites me is that we're going to take a bunch of talented players in there and we're going to add to it externally, but we're all going to add to it internally with some of these impact players that have earned their prospect status through the last 3 years and posted dominant years at really young ages.
Scott, kind of off that, you talked about the need to reshape the lineup a little bit with more contact, less swing and miss. When you have a young core and some of those prospects that likely won't be ready by 2026, where does that start?
Yeah, so I think it starts in a few ways. One thing that I noticed with our team is we started to get a little bit more pitchable late in the season. Some of our contact issues and approach issues started to get exposed in September. Some of the things that I saw were we started to get a little bit pull happy towards the end of the year. I think that created some holes for us that got exploited in the playoffs. I think sometimes we started to audible off the game plan a little bit quicker in at-bats. We started to audible towards an approach that tried to cover every pitch type in every location. That's really hard to do at this level. And I think that some of the interaction between approach and contact really started to hurt us. So the pitches we were swinging were exacerbating our contact issues. I think a lot of that is going to improve through the experience that these guys had. Like it or not, it was hard to watch in September. I fully admit it. I felt that too. These guys are going to be better off for it. They went through some deep struggles in September, and they came out the other side getting really hot in the playoffs, going into Cleveland, winning a really important series, and then taking Seattle to the brink in 15 innings. That experience and reflecting on the things that, you pay the power bill? Reflecting on the things that went well and help them get out of those struggles will help them. This team is going to show up in Lakeland, and they're going to be more battle-tested. That's 2 straight years in the postseason, and they've seen high-end pitching. They've seen what works against high-end pitching and what doesn't. So some of that's going to be through approach development this offseason that we're already working on. Some of that is going to be through some bat path work with our hitting coaches. I think some of the paths on our team started to change late in the year. I think that started to create some of the issues that we had through the year. I think there's still some work that we can do this offseason in facilities here when they come here, and then also in Lakeland to fix some path issues. And then the last part is through the additions that we are going to add internally. Some of the players are not going to be ready for 26, but a lot of them are going to be ready for 26. And so when we add some of those players with the skills, traits, and attributes that we have been prioritizing through the draft and development, I think those are the 3 main areas that we're going to be able to improve both our approach and contact issues that I outlined.
AJ, I'm curious, everything that he's saying, how is that from your point of view? Like, do you have to meet with your hitting group? Do you have to refashion your hitting group? Or what does those changes look like from you?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked, because I have a lot of thoughts on the offensive side of the game in this era has never been harder. You know, what is required out of a major league hitter is it's only getting harder and harder. Velocity up, movement, pitch shapes. You know, the pitching laboratories are much further along than the reaction side of the sport as an offensive player. And so it's constantly, the challenge is getting tougher and tougher. And I watch all these games, and I watch a high-contact team like the Cubs get 6 base runners against the Brewers as they were going through their own version of pitching chaos and pitching somebody different every other inning. Or I see, last night in the game, the Blue Jays' high-powered offense scored a bazillion runs in the ALDS, not be able to push a run across after the first swing of the night. Against a pitcher on short rest who's on the back end of a rotation, albeit a really, really talented rotation. So it's not an excuse as much as it's perspective. And I think I've spent the last couple of days, in my office and players filtering through there and packing up lockers and saying goodbye. And I asked Carp, what's the difference between, September for him and a dominant October where he was in control of all of his bats and getting hitting the ball out of the ballpark, getting intentionally walked, mixing in a few hits, drawing a few walks. And it all centers around getting a good pitch to hit. I know that's a comment that I've said over and over and over again, and it's way easier said than done. But pitch recognition and choosing, when to be aggressive, when to be patient against each pitcher is paramount. Over 162, it's agonizing, because there's going to be peaks and valleys in everybody's year. And so we're going to continue to push our players to have an audible with the swing, where it's not always just trying to chase the pull side power, although pull side air is getting rewarded more and more and more in our game, both in winning, and in earning potential. So playing the game seems to get exposed as you get deeper into the season and you get into playoff baseball and you see things that you don't see over the course of 162. How much of that can we bring, sort of into our every day is going to be important. So we're going to look at our messaging, we're going to look at our prep, we're going to look at our game planning, how are we implementing it, who is implementing it, all the above, because it's you got to be good at everything. So it's not pointing the finger at offense, it's not pointing the finger at defense, it's not pointing the finger at pitching. To be an elite team, and we were one of the elite teams, to be an elite team, you have to do it all, and you need it all. So I can't only focus this winter on contact. That's not going to get us where we want to get to, because we have other areas to get better at, but we are not going to be naive and think that we're going to run it back and do this again. Like one of the reasons I had such a hard time at the podium after Game 5 is like it's hard to get to where we're at. It's hard to get to run the whole race and get through the season and have 87 wins be disappointing. Like that's hard, to have a series win in the wild card. Like we're not going to think it's not good enough. We won the series and against a really good team. And then we get to 15 innings, one more run or one more pitch or one more defensive play, and it feels like we would be, reviewing Game 1 decisions and Game 1, offense, defense, base running, things like that, and instead we're sitting at this podium. So it's, I have great appreciation for everything that we did, but we are not going to be. We want more, and we know that we can do more and achieve, higher bars. And I'm glad that to some extent that I'm sitting here talking about all of that not being good enough. Like what a great accomplishment for us just to reset the bar as to where we're at and know that this city, this fan base, this organization, these players, these coaches can do more. And we're gonna work tirelessly to do it. We're gonna take a couple of days off, but we are gonna get back up at it and try to run that same race and be however many wins more it takes to win this division, to advance past the ALDS and bring a World Series to Detroit.
Hey, Scott, you were talking about the deadline, and you said every deadline you're probably a little dissatisfied. You talked about the high asking price. But considering how September looked and what AJ was just talking about, one pitch, one inning, one runaway, how do you not feel like it was a missed opportunity? I know you talk about the high asking prices, but this team hasn't won a World Series in 41 years. You were 9 games up. Like, how was the answer Paddock and Morton? And maybe you say, we got to give up a little more to get somebody that can actually help us win now instead of the future.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, when we acquired Paddock and Morton, the goal wasn't for them to play big roles for us in the postseason. So we got to the postseason. We lined up our pitching. We thought we were going to be dangerous once we lined up our pitching, and we were. We pitched really well in the postseason. I think we had a sub-3 ERA over the course of the whole postseason. We faced a really high-powered offense in Seattle, and we pitched them really tough, and I think the aggregate numbers suggest, hey, we pitched really well in the postseason. So I'm pretty sure the pitching wasn't necessarily like the primary issue as to why we're not in Toronto right now. I think the offensive performance we had down the stretch is a fair question on could we have done more. I think the question that I often have found myself reflecting on is like, should we have added a bat at the deadline? I think that's a very common question that we hear from different people. I run into people on the street, and I think as I reflect on that decision, I think it's important for us to remind ourselves of where we were at when we were making those decisions. And I think there's a couple things that are really important here. Like in July, we just had 4 position players in the All-Star game. On August 31st, our offense scored the 8th most runs of any team in baseball across 5 months. So we had the 8th best offense in baseball across 5 months. And in order to add a bat, we would have had to displace a high-performing player who had helped us achieve a top 8 offense at that point. And maybe we should have. Like, maybe that is a fair question. I think the more pressing and fundamental question is, how does a top 8 offense for 5 months become a bottom 8 offense in September? That's the question that really keeps me up at night. I think it's a function of our approach changes. It's a function of the contact. It's a function of the environments. That's something that we're going to spend a lot of time digging on because, that's the question that really stood in the way of us winning the World Series, in my opinion. Like, I think if we had continued to produce at a really high level while continuing to pitch at a really high level and play the clean, consistent baseball that drove us to 25 games over 500 at the end of August, like, I think that's a team that, like, we could really reasonably expect to be playing in Toronto right now with a great chance to win the World Series. So that's the thing I'm going to really obsess over this offseason. I understand the question. I think it's a totally fair question. But I think the more fundamental question is, what changed with our offense going from the first 5 months to the last month? And is that a blip in the radar, or is that predictive of the future? We got to get to the bottom of that question.
Just a quick follow-up. Understanding, like, obviously you were really happy where you were, but isn't that the job to maybe build a little support, understanding that things could dip offensively like they did?
Yeah, I mean, I think so that's the job. But the question, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, like, if I could go back and do it over again, like, would I focus on adding a bat? Like, I think if I could go back and do it all over again, I would focus on getting ahead of some of the changes that we may or may not have been able to see in August that created the September of underperformance and challenges. Like, I think that's the pressing question. Maybe the answer is both. Maybe we should have added a bat and we should have gotten ahead of some of the changes that our young hitters faced in difficult environments against better pitching in September and October. So those are the questions that are rattling around my head, and those are the questions that I'm going to obsess over and try to get answers to so that we can fix it for next year. Yep.
AJ, I believe you had your coaching staff come back fully intact this year from last year. Going forward to 2026, is that the plan, or will there be some changes?
Yeah, so first off, we have a tremendous staff, and we stayed together from 24 to 25 fully, and continued to try to push these players and work tirelessly to do that. And so I have to compliment the staff for everything that we did, to try to squeeze as many wins as we could and as much performance as we could. I knew that question's always asked at these pressers, and we haven't had a full discussion about the staff, yet. We're going to, and like we do with everything, we evaluate every possible way that we can get better. And while I think our staff has answered a lot of the challenges, and we're doing a lot of the things that's pushing this major league team forward and connected to the minor leagues and creating an environment when young players come up to be comfortable yet pushed. I mean, all that I think is in a really good place, but we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't debrief about our entire group, and we're going to. It's just, I expected this coaching staff to be in Toronto, and so in order to have a clear mind and a clear direction, we agreed to wait a couple days and meet this week on the direction of the staff, and we'll have something to you when we make a decision either way. But I am really proud of this group of coaches and the culture we've created and the work that goes into getting the players ready.
Scott, it feels like a significant part of the trade deadline strategy revolved around moving Troy Melton from the rotation to the bullpen. How do you look back on that decision, and how do you see his role moving forward?
Yeah, I'm really impressed by Troy Melton. I thought he pitched really well for us. He got really big outs for us, and he handled the transition from the rotation to the pen as seamlessly as any young player we have seen since I've been here. We moved him to the pen for two reasons. One, because we thought, it was a big need for us to add more swing and miss to our pen, and we had, a young player with high octane stuff that could pitch in a multi-inning role, as we've seen, get really big outs for us, and add a new dynamic to his pen so that when he looked down on the card, he had multiple paths to get to the finish line. The other reason why we focused more on the pen is due to innings concerns for him. He's a young pitcher. Injuries are so prevalent in our game. We have a duty to protect the players in our organization, and we try really hard to take that seriously. And so with the number of innings that Troy threw last year compared to the ones that he was on pace for this year, we didn't think it was fair or reasonable to just plug him into the rotation and start him every 5 days. And we didn't think we were going to get the best out of him in October if we just threw him into that role. So we chose to put him in the pen. And for a young pitcher with as little experience as he has, you can't ask for anything more than what Troy gave us in the postseason. And I'm really proud of him for stepping up and answering the bell and being a huge addition to this team. I don't think we get as far as we did without him.
And he's a starter, Chase. He's a starter.
Yeah, he'll be a starter next year. Don't worry.
Question for Scott on Tarek Skubal. I know you didn't want to talk too much about his immediate future, but looking back at what he's done, you guys got to the ALDS Game 5 back-to-back seasons. Do you think you could have gotten there without him? And then looking ahead, whether it's 2026 or 2027 and beyond, do you think you can get back to that point without Skubal?
I mean, listen, that's a really difficult question to answer because it's a total hypothetical. He's the best pitcher in baseball. He's going to hopefully win a second Cy Young. It would be arrogant and tone deaf for me to claim that we could do all this stuff without him. But on the other hand, it's also offensive to the other players in the clubhouse to treat us as a one-player team. So the fact is we've had Tarek, and he's made incredible contributions for the duration of his tenure with the Tigers, but especially the last 2 years. He's gotten a lot better, and he's pitched huge games for us, and this guy's done a really good job of keeping him healthy and performing at a really high level with how he has managed him early in the season. He's been a huge part of what we've done here, and it's a blast to watch him pitch. I don't really think I can engage in hypotheticals of what would happen in past years if he wasn't here and what would happen if he's not here in the future. He's here, and we're glad he's here. Yeah.
When did you guys know that Torres was playing with hernia, and was there discussions about shutting him down? Because obviously he's one of the ones who was such a high-level player earlier, and maybe the injury was the reason why he struggled towards the end. Are you better off playing somebody at, 60% than having somebody come up or finding somebody who's at 100%?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer to the last part of the question is no. We added Glaber to this team because we forecasted some approach and contact challenges with this group. Nobody has a better approach than Glaber Torres, and nobody has better bat-to-ball skills than Glaber Torres. His addition to this team, in many ways, powered a lot of the offensive performance that we saw for the first 5 months. I think one thing that is less obvious to fans that watch us is there are a lot of guys dealing with a lot of things in that clubhouse, and our guys deserve a ton of credit for powering through a lot of the things that they were dealing with that never got reported because they didn't, meet the bar for an injury report or something like that. Pretty much everyone in that clubhouse was banged up by the end. It was a long season. It was really grueling. It was really difficult. Glaber was, upfront and honest about reporting that to us. We felt like he still was capable of being a solid addition to our team, and you saw him go oppo at home, which is really hard to do. So he's a big part of what we did this year. We're really happy with his performance. He started the All-Star game as the second baseman for the AL team, and we think that. We wish he wasn't banged up in the second half, but we thought that he was still a big part of our team, even though he was banged up.
I'm going to add one thing and it's not a knock on how you asked it, but I think it's really difficult to just put a percentage on there for free. I don't know what percentage any of our guys are any given day, other than I know they're all under 100%. And so I just want to caution, when you say replace him when somebody's playing at 60%, that's a total guess. So, just, for us, I think we were communicating every day with Glaber, and I think it brings up, this is a free comment, so this, because I didn't get asked a question, but September really did, it relates to this topic. September, I think, really did impact us physically, emotionally, and mentally. And I think if we talk about the season, and I'm going to need a few more minutes before I can really grasp my total feelings on the season. what was the phrase? I'm only here so I don't get fined. I think September really did push those decisions to be in a lot more urgent. Whether it's resting a guy, whether it's pitching a guy, whether it's going all in on a bullpen game, or whether it's how we use Troy Melton. And so I think when you reflect back, and September is going to be the immediate thing that we all think about. It is things like that. Could I got him an extra day or two off? Like, how do you think we would have all responded if I just gave Gleyber Torres a random day off in September where we went 7-17? And he would not have had it. Like, that dude would have been right in my office asking me what the hell's wrong with me. So it was an area of concern for us physically as we were asking so much out of all of our guys. Adrenaline really helped these guys in Cleveland, in Boston, in Cleveland again, and then all the way through the 15th inning in Seattle. And I'm proud of how we fought through things, some that now are known and some that are still not known because of the nature of what we had to do the last 30, 40 games.
I don't know if he has an injury or anything like that, but people seem to be worried about Parker Meadows the last month this season. How do you fix him at the plate?
Yeah, so I think Parker was consistently trying to get himself back. I mean, he had one of the most random injuries I've ever been a part of in my career, of where I've never seen or heard of a nerve shutting down and him not being able to have a functioning part of his body and part of his game. And that sent him on a path of playing catch up the entire season. And we did not see the best of him, the most consistent that we've seen, and we know that we're going to get. And so, one is having a healthy offseason is going to be really good for him. Two, I think it's one of the few times he's had to play through a lot of things throughout the year, and we did miss him. We missed his defense. We missed his presence. When we got him back and he started to get off to a really good start, I moved him to the top of the order. And then I reversed course and started putting him at the bottom of the order because I recognized that he was sort of battling mechanics, battling approach, battling pulling the trigger a little bit, but offered such good defense that kept him in the lineup. So I think we're going to attack all those player plans. We're going to have our debrief with our guys and our version of exit interviews to get some feedback from them, and we'll give them some feedback because it's a really important offseason for our players. I said that to them in Seattle, that we're not just going to run it back. We're not just going to try again. We have to address, it might be something different for every player, but it's with every player and every coach and every executive on how we can get incrementally better to get back into the competition, come Lakeland.
Also, just to add to that and sort of humanize it for a second, like that question you asked, like, you could have asked the exact same question with the same terminology for Dylan Dingler a year ago. We saw him perform down the stretch. Could have asked, like, hey, how do you fix him? And now we look at Dylan Dingler, look at the year he just put together on both sides of the ball and managing a pitching staff and some of the game calling attributes. And it's like, wow, like, what a difference a year can make. That starts this offseason. It starts this offseason for all of our players, all of our coaches, all of our staff. And it's not just Parker. We got to get more out of our players. We got to create more Dylan Dingler type stories where guys can fundamentally change their sort of standing trajectory, value, performance over the course of a year. It's something that we spend every day on. Like, we're not going to just take like 6 weeks off and then like see you guys at the GM meetings. Like, it starts right now. He talked about taking some days off. I don't think we're actually going to take days off. I think we're going to start working on it immediately.
Colt Keith, he started the year at first base in spring training. Where do you guys see him moving forward? Where will he focus on a position this winter? Where do you see his future?
Yeah, I mean, I can start with that. So we're going to do exit interviews with all of our players. A significant input into those decisions is their perspective, how they feel about positions, how comfortable they feel about positions. With Colt, he's capable of playing first, second, and third, which is a significant advantage for us from a roster construction standpoint and a roster usage standpoint. The ability to add and impact left-handed bat like that at a number of different positions gives us a number of different avenues to build this team and a number of different options in game there. We feel as an organization that he can play all three. We're going to talk to him about his priorities and how he feels about playing all three. But the opportunity to continue to get more work at all three, I think, is really important for us from a roster construction and usage standpoint. And also, like, what he just did is really impressive. Like, we just threw him at third. I know he played some third in the minor leagues, but he hadn't played third in a while. And we started throwing him at third mid-season, and he performed really well, made some plays that, you know, I found very impressive. And that's without, like, a full offseason of focusing on it. It's without a full spring training of working on some of the plays that may happen a couple times a year. He just kind of got thrown into the fire and was able to really play the position, which is something that I find really impressive. And I think it's really impressive to have a coaching staff that can help a player do that mid-season. We're going to try not to do that to him again. That was more based on need. But the fact that he can play all three positions gives us a real advantage as a team.
Yeah, my take on it is at this time last year, we had the first discussion, I think Scott and I did, shortly after this press conference like this, where we pushed him to first base. And he spent all winter working on first base, and where there was a lot of talk on whether Spencer Torkelson was going to be playing much first base, DH. We put him in the outfield in spring. Like, think about all that happened over the course of a year, which is why it's hard to capture the entirety of the topic. And then I think his adjustments at third base was on the right track. I think it was a little unfair to him, as Scott mentioned, that it was hard for him, but he got better and better the more that he did it. And what I learned was we need a full commitment to the basics of these positions and not just put the glove on him and put him over there and think that he'll figure it out. And he's done a good job, but he's a perfect example, and he's really good at all these areas. He's good at nutrition. He's good at his work ethic. He's good in the gym. You know, we need our strength and conditioning group to get the first step faster. We need the infield group. Joey's constantly talking about presentation of glove. You talk about strength and conditioning. Like, this is a guy who can put on lean mass and be super strong quickly. And we've got to kind of honor that with based on what position he's going to play. You have, oh, and by the way, there's the offensive side. So when we say like comprehensive, like development and comprehensive use of our staff, everybody needs to sprinkle a little bit of that in for Colt and every other player. But the fact that he's probably more comfortable at third than second, which is amazing. He'll tell you that he's comfortable at second, and he should, because he played there a long time. But we're starting to get, break through with his comfort level with these positions, and based on how our winter goes, we'll adapt accordingly. But at no point do I think this winter he's going to be able to say one position. For the best use of our roster and our team, I think he's a viable option at multiple.
Just housekeeping stuff going into the winter.
Sure.
Talked about Glaber surgery. Is there anybody else that's kind of slated for surgery? And I wanted to ask you about some guys that kind of disappeared this year with injuries, like Brisky and Madden, and even Foley and Gunther. To some, we kind of know what happened to them. But
yeah,
what's the future for those kind of guys?
Yeah, we owe you some medical news. Give us a chance to get through the exit physicals. Our medical staff does a good job of going through guy by guy. We'll produce a report for you with all of that information. But yeah, I mean, I think we were one of the most injured teams in all of baseball this year, which sometimes is the luck of the draw because injuries are so unpredictable. But I think the subtext of many of our answers here is this group deserves a lot of credit for fighting through a lot of things this summer and getting to a place where we could get to the postseason in back-to-back years. Injuries were certainly one of them. And AJ and his staff deserve a lot of credit for constantly adapting to the roster that we actually had available as a result of some of the injuries. And some of the injuries weren't actually like IL worthy. Like some of them were like, hey, we got to stay away from this guy today, or we got to stay away from this guy for 2 days or something like that. It was a really hard year on that front. We're hopeful that the years ahead are going to be less injury prone than this one.
For either of you guys, when you emphasize the need for more contact, How do you assess the season that Riley had, and how do you weigh the home runs versus the strikeouts? And I know these things don't happen overnight, but is there a need for him to consider a tweak to his swing, a tweak to his approach in pursuit of higher contact, fewer whiffs, even if that comes at the expense of less power?
So, yeah, I don't think it has to come at the expense of anything. You know, I think the topic of strikeouts is sort of league-wide. Pitchers are chasing them. Hitters are they don't like them, but they you know, I always joke with guys, you might not dislike them enough, you know, because I think it's important that it's an, you know, it can be an empty out, but you want your guys to take their A swing as much as possible. So there is a give and take. With Riley, you know, I've talked to him about his approach. I've talked to him about his thought process. I've talked to him about, you know, when you're in the middle of the fight and guys are throwing 98 to 104 now, the kid in Milwaukee, you can't be in the box and mentally be defensive about strikeouts. What you can do is have sort of plan A and plan B and have to adapt accordingly to the game. What never changes is you need to swing at the right pitches. And so, you know, not that I want to rank strikeouts, but the strikeouts in the zone, you know, they're trying to hit it. Like when they swing and the ball's in the zone, they miss it. Like I kind of joke with them, but I'm half not joking. Like they're trying to hit it. Like when they make a pass at the ball. So you can't just tell him you need to hit that. He'd be like, no shit. Like I'm trying to make contact with the ball. So that's not the way to coach him. The getting somebody to maximize their game planning is. That I think we can get a lot better at. That I think we can concede certain parts of the competition, but not overall power. Nobody wants Riley to hit for less power. Nobody wants Torque to hit for less power. Nobody wants Carp to hit for less power. We want them to continue to nudge at progress in swinging at the right pitches that they can do damage on. And then, you know, when the game suggests that it's you don't feel right, you're not picking up the ball, you can't see it, Gavin Williams breaking balls, super nasty, like all those things are going to tell you that you need a plan B at some point during your approach. Easier said than done. Super easy to see the box on TV and tell them to stay inside that box. Very easy for us to see the result of the bat and ask you, why are you swinging at that? But as players who are already good, how do we get them good to great? Is to shrink those stretches where it felt like we were swinging at a lot more pitches than we needed to in order to do the same amount of damage. And some of that is confidence, some of that is approach, some of that is feedback after the fact. But we can be better at that, and Riley's going to be better at that. And across the board, I've watched player after player, you know, address some of the frustration with strikeouts with more contact and not concede that I'm still going to put up the scoreboard numbers that we all love.
You're just getting riled up.
I am. I know.
The only thing to add there is we talk about this a lot internally, earning better pitches. You know, there's an interaction between the pitches you swing at and the pitches that you get. So when we talk about becoming, you know, more pitchable, it's a lot easier for me to sit here at the microphone and say than it is for our players to do. So I don't want this to come off as it being easy at all. But sometimes, and I think we did this a lot in the summer, sometimes spitting on tough pitchers' pitches earns you a better pitch to hit later in that bat, and it earns you a better pitch through the advance report of opponents coming in. And so as we got more pitchable, I think we earned worse pitches to hit, and then we continued to try to cover those pitches. So there's a cascading effect to this. It's why we pay so close attention to this. It's why we're trying to build an offense that is nudged closer towards better approaches and more contact skills. But we got to earn better pitches as an organization. And there were long stretches of this year and last year where we did earn better pitches, and then we punished those better pitches. And I think June's a really good example of that. Like, when we held the zone better, we earned better pitches, did more damage, and had the best offense in baseball. And we got to get to an offense that's a lot closer to June than September.
And then on the note of contact, it felt like Glaber was probably your best hitter in that regard from almost start to finish. Just what's your level of interest in bringing him back, and how does the expected or imminent arrival of McGonigal affect that decision?
Yeah, Glaber was a huge addition to this team. You guys saw it, not only for his production, but the presence that he had in the lineup. There were many nights this summer where he really got us going in the first inning. He had one of those grindy, really difficult, high quality at bats that both earned better pitches for himself, but earned better pitches for the rest of the lineup, and really set the tone. I mean, how many times this summer did we push a pitch count for a starter in the first inning up to 28, 29, 30? I mean, you want to talk about setting the tone for the rest of the game. We did a great job of that, and Glaber was right in the middle of that. I can't really speculate on what opportunities he's going to have. This winter, he's earned the right to be a free agent, and we'll approach that at the GM meetings. Kind of more of a GM meetings topic than right now.
To follow up on that, he mentioned McGonigal. I mean, you talked about the top prospects being closer. How realistic is it that a guy like him is in Detroit this spring? And I guess to Will's question too, does that affect free agent decisions this winter for you? The prospect of those guys being here soon.
Yeah. So I expect the players that posted dominant years in Double-A to factor into our big league team next year. They've earned it. They posted incredible years as 20-year-olds, very young for level. I expect their progress to continue, and I expect them to be in Detroit at some point next year. Does that affect what we do this winter? Absolutely. How could it not? I mean, these guys are really exciting young players that can help us on both sides of the ball, and we got to make sure that we are preserving opportunity for them. We also have to compete. The expectations have changed around here. We have to thread that needle whereby we are putting ourselves in a really good position to get off to a good start, but also add to that team throughout the summer internally with some of these players that are coming. Kevin is in the fall league right now. He's playing some shortstop. He's playing some third base. He has played second, short, and now he's going to have experience at third base. I'm not going to announce that he's going to be in Major League camp because I should probably tell him before I announce it. But I think a lot of these guys are going to be in Major League camp. You're going to see them firsthand, and more importantly, they're going to get a lot of experience being around the big league coaches and the big league players, so that when they ultimately get to the big leagues, they're more comfortable, and we have an environment ready for them that allows them to jump onto this team and make this team better immediately. I will say the only other thing is they've already affected what we've done up to this point, because how could they not? We have invested so much in a lot of these players, and we want to create opportunity for them to come here and get better, just like we've done with guys like Dylan Dingler, creating opportunity for them to ultimately get on this team and then demonstrate they can be one of the better catchers in all of baseball. We got to continue to create runway for these players, because our future, it's too important to our future. We are in a position right now where the present is really bright and the future is really bright, and we got to preserve that no matter what we do this winter.
I'll just wait for him to go to the GM meetings. I'll fly to Phoenix, and I'll tell Kevin myself.
Do you guys remember when he announced that they were coming to the big league camp a year ago?
Yeah, how'd that work?
Talk about insubordination. Unbelievable.
There's obviously no guarantee of sustained success in this sport. I mean, it's one thing to go back-to-back appearances in the postseason, but back-to-back-to-back, there aren't many teams that are able to do that. Just a few years ago, it was only, 47 wins for this organization. As you guys stare down everything that needs to be done to take it to the next level, do you get the sense that it's harder to make a jump of 4 wins to make it to that next round in the postseason than it is over a relatively short period of time to make a jump of 20, 30, or 40 wins just to get to where you're at now?
I mean, I think we probably spent all day on that question. The things that pop into mind immediately are we have some things working for us and we have some things working against us. I think the things that are working for us are we went for an entire organization with very little postseason experience at all last year to basically an entire team that has been in the postseason for 2 straight years, been in high pressure environments, hostile environments like Houston, Cleveland, Seattle. Like, they've experienced playing at a really high level when they couldn't even hear themselves think, and they found a way to perform. You can't recreate that anywhere. You cannot like replicate that environment in spring training to prepare these guys for it. Experience really matters, and this group just got a ton of experience for the last 2 years. So I think in some ways the experience that this group has now will make it easier for them to make that jump, because I think, there will always be butterflies and nerves and anxiety going into the postseason, but I think it's different if you've been there 2 consecutive years and you're doing it again. So I think that's one of the things that's working for us. One of the things that's working against us, it's really hard. There are, 4 teams that got to the DS in back-to-back years over the last 2 years. We're one of the 4. It's really hard. Like, there are a ton of, teams that had really high expectations going into this year who didn't make the playoffs. There are some teams that went ultra aggressive at the trade deadline and didn't even make the playoffs or got bounced in the first round. This whole thing is really hard. So I think, one of the subtexts of this entire press conference is we should be really proud of those guys. Like, however you cover this team, like, please make sure that everyone, especially our fans, is really proud of what they did, because what they just did is really hard. But we want more than that. We want to continue to improve. And so I think, to answer your question more directly, like, I don't know which one is harder. I just know what challenge we have right in front of us, and this one's really hard, but we are committed. We're absolutely determined to get it right and to bring a World Series to Detroit.
All right. Good hour plus. Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Yep.